Hi, I'm Ian Whittaker, host of the JCDecaux Digital Changemakers podcast. The Digital Changemakers podcast showcases industry research and insights to inspire senior marketeers to push the boundaries on their marketing strategies and become change agents in their organization. Today, I'm delighted to be joined by Nat AR Arnot, Executive Vice President of Marketing at The Economist. This year, the iconic news-based publication launched its largest brand building campaign since the late 2000s. Targeting a younger audience, the tongue-in-cheek campaign has generated a real buzz. Nada joins me for an insightful discussion around why she believes long-term brand building is particularly important for publications in today's media landscape, and the importance of re-educating the boardroom on the value of brand marketing in achieving long-term business goals. Welcome, Nada. Nada, thanks very much for joining us. And look, I know it's an early start for you because you're in New York, so that's very, very kind to actually get up at such an early hour to come and join us for this. It's fantastic to have you on here. Usually with these things, what we start off with is we just talk about your background, where you've come from, how you came to be at The Economist. So if you could just say a couple of words about that, that'd be fantastic.
Yeah, absolutely. And first of all, super happy to be here. I usually start my days early, but just in my defense, it's actually not that early today because we changed our clocks a couple of weeks ago. So we're only 4 hours different. So
okay.
I could have let that go and made it sound like
you should have done.
I've really hustled through the morning, but no, it's all good. So Nat AR Introduction, EVP of Marketing at The Economist, and among a bunch of different things that I do here, my primary focus is driving global subscriber growth, and I also oversee brand marketing. My path to getting to The Economist is actually quite non-linear and probably some would say unconventional. So I started my career as a federal government of Canada employee, a policy strategist but very soon realized that my energetic composition did not jive well with the bureaucratic pace of government. So I moved as a, early 20-something-year-old. I moved to New York for what was supposed to be a year. Now we're 20 years and counting. I never left the city. But when I moved here, I got my first taste of marketing. So my foray into digital marketing actually started in 2004. When I launched a website called The Funky Stork, which is, was, a website that catered to expectant fathers. At the time, there weren't any websites that catered to that demographic. And then I transitioned into becoming one of the very first mommy bloggers, which was really great because, one, it was entrepreneurial, but two, it gave me the opportunity to get some really great swag for my newborn while also generating income. And then following that, I decided I wanted to go back in-house into something a little bit more traditional. So I started with a role at NBC where I spearheaded the search marketing program there, and then later their audience development efforts, and then subsequently diversified my experience by working in agencies, startups, education companies, all focused on growth marketing. And then in the last 8 years, I spent my time in subscription services, particularly building and expanding streaming video platforms at companies like Hearst, AMC Networks, and BBC.
Wow, that's great. That is a very, very varied, very impressive range of experiences.
What I really quite enjoy, and I think common theme throughout my career, is I'm very entrepreneurial. I like building things. I like making a difference. Which is, funny enough, after I left government, I started in government because I want to make a difference. And I realized ironically, I can actually make a very big difference by sitting in the marketing world, working in various media companies.
Entrepreneurial and the government are not necessarily two words that go together, most people would associate. But I want to pick up actually on something you said in terms of your role, which you said you're in charge of subscriptions, but you're also as well in charge of marketing. Now, to me, that feels quite an unusual combination. Things normally what you would get is that you would get sort of those two roles separated. You wouldn't get sort of all being placed into one. So just from your standpoint, how sort of having those two roles together, And I guess you could argue there's a wider question here about the future of the CMO. How does it relate to things like the chief revenue officer, sort of those roles moving forwards? But just in terms of your role, can you just explain how sort of you deal with handling both those issues and how actually, with both remits been under your umbrella, what difference you think that makes to maybe most organizations where maybe that would be separated out?
Yeah, it's a really good question. So when I started in-house at NBC, that is actually the first time I think a lot of organizations were starting to think about the role of the marketer differently, right? Mm-hmm. So when I started at NBC, we had essentially what was the entrepreneurial, innovative, scrappy marketers, which were the digital marketers. They were a little bit of the cowboys of the marketing sphere. And then you had the traditional marketers who did a lot of the brand awareness marketing, and they were separate. And I remember coming into NBC and thinking, marketers have a really, ironically, really bad brand, right? They are seen as people who spend money frivolously. They don't have to justify their spend. They don't really measure their spend. And I'm obviously very broad generalizations, but that's kind of the brand that the marketers had. And I very early on said to myself, I am going to demonstrate in this role and every other marketing role I ever have that marketing doesn't have to be a cost center. It can be a profit center. And in doing so, I've carved out in every role, not just at The Economist, a position where I am part growth, actually very big part growth, meaning I understand the business and the mechanics of the business and what makes the business grow, but leveraging marketing as the vehicle to get there. And so obviously brand is a big component of it, but there are other inputs from the marketing side, performance marketing, programmatic, and all automations and retention and all those pieces all sort of fit together. But and I always build teams around this as well, is that you have to bring them all together. Otherwise, marketing sits in a silo and doesn't have the true connection to what they're running towards. And what they're running towards is growing the business.
That's such an important point here. And it's something we've emphasized on this podcast time and time again, that essentially the need for marketers really to have that direct connection up to the board level, because it plays such a central part in driving the success of a firm. And if that connection is not there, then effectively what happens is, as you say, it's part of the thing that marketing can never properly do its job. It's part also as well, the board doesn't realize how important marketing is to the growth function. And then also as well, when you're dealing, I would imagine, with people across in other areas, sort of other C-level executives, it can be harder to sort of integrate things. And you say the risk is that marketing becomes siloed.
Exactly. And years ago, in another position I was in, I remember once doing a presentation to the organization, trying to educate them on the role of marketing. And to your question around why should marketing not be sitting over here separate versus being integrated. And I remember putting a slide up on the screen, and it's basically a wheel, and the hub was marketing, and the spokes coming out of marketing were all the different parts of the organization. There was data, there's report, there's research, there's product, and so on and so forth. And it was a little bit cheeky because obviously it made it look like marketing was the center of the business. But the point that I was trying to make was product can get better if they're integrated with marketing. Marketing can be better if it's integrated with product, and vice versa with data, vice versa with finance, vice versa with all the other parts of the organization. And once you have that understanding, then marketing becomes this common thread through everybody's thought process in the organization. It just makes everything better. It means that your campaigns are no longer just pure campaigns. They are fully integrated with the psyche of the business and where the business needs to go.
Yeah, and it's a funny thing. I mean, sort of most recently we've seen this with sort of Starbucks. With the whole question of with what they've done with the CMO, is that a promotion? Is it effectively bringing sort of marketing closer to the board? Or actually, is it reducing the importance of marketing and effectively diffusing its effect throughout the organization and so forth?
Yeah. And what's interesting is that, again, a lot of my roles, I've always sat or reported to the C-suite or the board because it's been the roles that I've taken in marketing have been business driving roles. And in a way, to your question, it's peeling away some of the traditional infrastructures of what marketing was perceived to be, but adding more to it, right? And it just means that you have to be more business minded. Everyone talks about being data oriented, and absolutely, but it's more than just relying on data, and that's absolutely important. But it's also just having the sensibility of knowing what will drive the right business outcomes, not just pure, one KPI, pure growth. It could be growth for now, growth for 10 years from now, whatever you're trying to strategically shift the business towards, all of the above.
I'm a great advocate of that. I mean, I always say if you're in marketing, what you need to know is you need to know what's going on in the wider world. You need to know what's going on in the bigger picture. You need to know what's going on in terms of a company's, what their strategic priorities are, their management teams, what pressures they're getting from investors. What is exactly in terms of the wider industry landscape, sort of what are their key priorities. And it's very hard if you don't have a full grasp on what those are to really then know how marketing fits into that. So definitely a message with which would concur. When you came into the Economist, what were the main challenges that you saw with the Economist brand? And I guess also as well, maybe talk about sort of some of your thinking as to how you could actually change those perceptions.
Yeah. So when I joined, and it's been a little over a year now, they were already on, and we've been around for 180 years, so I can't take credit for the amazing history and legacy that it's already built off the back of amazing journalism. But they're already, the subscriber momentum was great, and my role on the subscriber side was just to keep it going and to accelerate it and to help expand into younger, more gender balanced audiences. So that's on subscriber growth. What we also realized is it had been years and years since we've invested in brand marketing. And so that was a really big priority when I came in, was how do we reinvigorate our brand through brand marketing? Because you have to remember, well, one, like decades ago, iconic white out of red ads mattered everywhere, very cheeky, like very memorable and iconic, amazing. But we since moved away from it and kind of went quiet. We also were very much a print, actually we were exclusively a print publication until we shifted towards digital, which is the right thing to do. But what happens is that brand impression from your print magazine suddenly goes away. Like if you talk to anyone probably over the age of 30 and they know The Economist, you ask, how do you know The Economist? And they'll say, I remember that magazine being on my parents' coffee table when I was growing up. Yeah. Those days are gone. My kids have no idea what I'm reading on my phones, and nor do I have a print magazine on my coffee table anymore. And so the fact that those subtle but important brand moments no longer exist, it makes brand marketing that much more important. So coming in, I very much wanted to make a case for reinvesting in the brand, building awareness, brand equity, brand preference, all the key brand KPIs in the US market in particular, because it's the market with the greatest headroom for us, but also in the UK where we're very well known. But again, we're well known because that's our home base, and really trying to build the preference among the younger audience in the UK is where I see the biggest opportunity. So reinvesting in brand was actually the biggest priority for me when I came in.
And that's an important point because, often, certainly in terms of the mantra has been for a long time about brand has almost been, as it were, shunted to the side is the wrong way of putting it. But let's say there's been a lot more noise about performance and, as it were, the short-term hit, as it were. So when you actually sort of made that case for building the brand and saying this is what we need to focus on, what were the main arguments that you used to say this was actually the key thing for what we need to concentrate on? rather than necessarily getting an immediate short-term boost in terms of the effects in the subscriber numbers.
Yeah. So in full disclosure, I used to be a non-believer of brand marketing. I was, again, 2004, I was early days digital marketing, probably one of the very first cohorts of digital marketers. And at that time, I didn't believe in brand. It was, the fact that you could track everything, you get immediate results in digital marketing and all the cool things that came along with it. I was enamored by it. So I was like, we don't need brand. We just go out and target people. And then over the years, I realized, actually, brand is really important. And so as a non-believer, I know the arguments that help convince me get to where I am today. And so I use that a lot internally at The Economist and other roles I've also had. And I usually start with a little bit of storytelling, right? And it's everyone loves the funnel or the construct of the funnel. And I started with saying, okay, the funnel is structured like this. It's very wide at the top so that you get more people in who can, you can afford to lose them at every stage of that funnel so that you have more people at the bottom to convert. When you stop investing in brand, the top of your funnel shrinks and suddenly you're left with this teeny tiny cylinder. And by the time you move people through your cylinder, you have very few people to convert at the bottom of the funnel. So a lot of brands, particularly during COVID, rightfully so, pulled back on brand marketing because we were all sheltered in place and we weren't out looking at brand placements, and maybe TV and radio were still relevant. But a lot of brands, because they're brick and mortar, there's no point in investing that. People weren't going to stores. So they all cut their brand budgets and everything was still okay. And they're like, we actually didn't need that brand budget line. It was actually just wasted spend. And then the next year they didn't reinvest, and the next year they didn't reinvest. And suddenly CPAs start going up, growth stalls, and a lot of brands are left kind of perplexed. Like, what happened? What's going on in the marketplace that we are no longer growing? Well, what happened is years ago, you stopped talking to people about your brand. And so you had these brands just didn't have that same awareness. And what they were doing was they were living off that pool of prospects that they had acquired pre-COVID with brand marketing. So that was one part of the strategy to get buy-in for brand. And so, that's the art part. And then the science part, as a digital marketer and former non-believer, you rely on data, right? And so being able to articulate that we will be able to measure everything every step of the way gave a lot of confidence that we wouldn't be spending budgets frivolously or blindly. So that started with using data through creative testing to make sure we had the right creative that would resonate with the right audience that we wanted to target and that our message was getting through. So we went out into market. We didn't have to have debates around a boardroom table. The data told us what to use. And then also laying out a measurement framework to say, this is how we're going to measure success. We're going to do quarterly brand lift studies to make sure the channels are having the impact that we want them to have impacts. We will do marketing mix modeling. We'll do that regularly. So again, another reinforcement that the brand investment is having a nice halo effect. And then we'll do brand trackers twice a year, see that we're moving in the right direction. But the most important part was to also articulate and manage expectations that results are not going to happen overnight. So when you throw on a billboard and a TV ad, and then the C-suite turns around and says, why isn't the business growing? I wanted to avoid that conversation. So I very clearly articulated, this is a long game. You have to wait 12 to 18 months before you start really moving the needle on some of these metrics. We'll have little health indicators that we're going in the right direction, but real seismic impact won't happen until 12 to 18 months. So you have to keep investing, even though the knee-jerk reaction might be, let's just pull back now and see what happens. No, you have to lean in and see what happens.
Yeah. It's a funny thing what you mentioned in terms of the pullback of ad spending. I mean, the people who listen to this podcast regularly, sort of unfortunately, they're going to be they're going to hear this again. But one of the things that has been really interesting from a company results perspective, when you listen to what managements have been talking about over the past 6 to 9 months, and this is particularly in areas such as CPG, sort of really consumer-facing industries, is almost, as it were, the surprise and the realization just how much brand strength has allowed them to push through greater than expected price increases to the consumer, which they weren't expecting, because they were expecting a massive impact on their volume levels, which didn't come through. And they've turned around and said, well, the reason for that is the strength of our brand has allowed us to push those price increases to the consumer. And it feels as though the penny has dropped with many management teams that, as you say, this is very much of a long-term investment, that you do the investment now, and even though the temptation may be to cut it in times when times are difficult, if you do that, it's a bit like a car with petrol. You can run on the reserve tank for a little bit, but at some point you're going to run out of fuel.
Yeah.
And that's essentially sort of what's been happening with many of these companies who haven't been investing sort of in their brand.
That's absolutely right. And that was part of my my argument internally, and I say it time and time again. We want to build brand awareness, and you want to build brand preference. No doubt about it, right? People need to know you, and they want to buy you. The most important one was the one that I mentioned in the middle, which was brand equity. When you have brand equity, then you can afford to demand a higher price, because people know you, and then they see the value in what you are offering, whether it be a subscription, a streaming subscription, a print subscription, whatever it might be. You have true equity in your brand itself that is not a tangible investment in that respect, but it is so powerful and so meaningful that that's what will carry everything that else you're doing in your business, whether it be pricing strategy, product diversification, or just pure marketing campaigns.
Absolutely. And as you say, I mean, you can see this, the brands that have the strongest equity are the ones who are able to get the highest point, because people will pay. They'll pay for that value. So, and what were the results that you saw with the effects of the campaign?
Yep. So we just launched in early January. We started with billboards, and then we rolled out radio, and then most recently TV. So again, long game. Let's talk in 12 to 18 months to tell you exactly what the impact. But some of the immediate impacts we saw and continue to see better efficiency in our CPAs, particularly in paid search, because people are starting to hear about us and get reintroduced to us. It's just helping lubricate the entire marketing machine.
And how did you find in terms of, because outdoor is something which still remains sort of a niche for many advertisers. So how did you find that? And then on the other hand, of course, television is mass market, but the consensual argument is, well, television's value is going away and sort of is declining. So how do you find both those platforms were effective for you? Through
MMM, I was able to demonstrate that the return on investment on TV and outdoor was actually really strong. We're talking 3 to 4 multipliers. It was very, very strong, because it helped build that awareness, that helped downstream efficiency. It doesn't convert on the spot, because that's not the job it's supposed to do. TV is on a decline, still mass audiences. That audience is still not gone. We've recently done some third-party research, and even found it among students, TV is still impactful. Streaming video ads, obviously still very impactful, within their TV shows. And then out of home, there's something about an out-of-home placement, especially when you're doing it in a city like London or a city like New York. You're getting millions and millions and millions of people every single day. And if they're walking past a billboard in Times Square and they see an ad for The Economist, even if they don't consciously think about it, they see it, and in their old brain somewhere, the message is, oh, they're a relevant enough brand to have a place in one of the most iconic places in the world. That has intrinsic value. And then the other thing that I should have mentioned when you asked the impact of the campaign so far. I mean, the impact on morale, like internal morale, is immense. Like the brand swagger that our employees are walking around with, that was so impressive. And I've seen this time and time again as well. It just builds internal confidence. It inspires teams. It builds loyalties to the company. And then it also makes it a little bit easier to attract and recruit new talent because they see your ads everywhere and they want to be part of that.
That often gets overlooked. I mean, it's an interesting point. So that the focus, and arguably it should be, or the main priority should be the external focus. Mm-hmm. But what often gets missed is then, as you say, the internal well-being, so that what it does for morale. Mm-hmm. And that gets overlooked so often, but actually you can't run an organization if your staff are demoralized and don't feel that great about the product they're selling.
Yeah.
Guess what? If you don't believe in yourself, no one else is going to believe in you.
Yeah. And listen, every brand is always looking for advocates and brand influencers. They're sitting on them in their organization. Yeah. All you have to do is ignite a little bit of that fire if it's not there. And sometimes the brand campaign does it.
That's an important point, I think, to bear in mind. We always do at the end of these sort of, for our speakers, our guests, to talk about what were the tips, what were the things that they would recommend to people who are in the industry, and particularly I think on the brand building side, given what we've talked about, the importance, you've outlined some of them there, but what would be your top 3 tips?
Yeah, I think number one, never underestimate the value of brand. There's a quote by Steve Forbes that I always love, which is, your brand is the most important investment you can make in your business. Mm-hmm. So don't forget that. So continue to invest in brand marketing. Always measure, because mm-hmm. if you have some data to go alongside it, it just makes you sleep a lot better at night, and it makes the conversations with the C-suite that much more effective. And then I guess the third one is just continue to innovate. Like, don't be afraid to try different things with your brand. And I mean that from an awareness perspective. Take a risk on what feels very analog, such as radio and mm-hmm. TV. Right? Just because everyone on the soccer field or football field is running towards the ball, there are still tried and true placements like TV that are there for true impact. So continue to test and be courageous to stay in that space while also testing new innovative placements.
That is absolutely superb. That's a great note on which to end. Nada, thanks very much. And even though you sort of let slip that it's only 4 hours behind, not 5, I'd still like to thank you for actually coming on early in the morning. So really appreciate it. And really great to speak to you. I think there's some fantastic lessons there for everyone.
Great. Thanks for having me. This has been a ton of fun.
Thank you, Nada, for the fantastic discussion around the importance of brand and the need to reposition marketing as an investment rather than a cost. If there's anything you would like to ask us, or hear more about, you can visit the JCDecaux Digital Changemakers Hub online. We hope you've enjoyed listening. And wherever you get your podcasts, don't forget to subscribe, like, and share.